Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Deep Thoughts. This is a nice, so I make a bunch of crackly noise here, like the old lady at the movie theater. Why an old lady? I don't know. Next time it'll be an old man. Usually it's both of them together. It's early Saturday afternoon here. Fairly decent weather. I'd say 67, 70, somewhere in there. But it's going to drop like an anvil here in about 2 hours, so I'm enjoying the sweet spot of the day. As you can tell, we are going to discuss, well, maybe you can't. I'm not sure exactly how I'm going to title this. Maybe I should keep it clear and just say, is this heaven? Pretty sure it's not. But I think we should analyze something because I think it has a profound effect on who we are as humans. It sort of relates to my Promise series, the alien promise, the flat earth promise, which is that we sort of look for these moments of relief, the salvation moments. Well, it sucks right now, but it's going to get better in the future. So I'll just tolerate this, and eventually it'll be okay. I want to open up the episode with just the notion that I definitely think there's two hemispheres, to quote a bad geometric metaphor, to reality, due to the fact that this mortal coil seems to be born, and then obviously it goes through various stages and ends, but we have all kinds of evidence that people continue to exist. The soul continues to exist. I mean, there's just too much evidence to overlook it. Now, for those that control this world, they don't want you to think that because they're in control of you. And the more that you buy into the limited paradigms of which they've gained control over, then you're completely a serf, a slave to their system, right? Now, within certain concepts of thought, we do believe that we are still controlled when we are here. Let's say you buy into a soul and the afterlife and God and angels and whatever. But then you wake up every day and you owe taxes. You wake up every day and you got to pay money, which is a result of calorie energy invested in a job, rewarded in monetary units that then you have to give up to eat, sleep, and have some fun. So you kind of sit there and go, well, I don't have access to heaven right now, guys, so I'm going to live in this world, and in this world, I'm a slave. Sometimes it's interesting to pretend to be something different in order to understand the possibilities of actually being different. I said it specifically that way with a brutal haiku, so you'll think about it this way. What if I came up to any one of you and you're in a fairly decent stage in life, meaning you feel comfortable with yourself. Whatever age you are, whatever level of maturity you are, you're good. And you could be in a dire situation. In fact, this might have more impact if you feel like you're in the wrong job and wrong position in life. But I come up to you and I give you two blessings. I make you immortal, which means you cannot be hurt. Mack truck hits you, you're just like the thing in the Marvel movies. It just wraps around you. 2, you have no need to eat or excrete. You can, but you don't have to. Man, we haven't had the ice cream truck in an episode for a while. Giving all the kids diabetes. Well, that's a mind-fucking song, isn't it? So I make you immortal and I remove your need to consume. What benefits do you get there? Well, let's overlook the fact that you're concerned now that you're going to outlive all your relatives and your kids and all that stuff. Let's put that aside for a second. Let's just say you're a single person, single female, single male. Yeah, all right. You knew you were going to have all your relatives pass before you because they're older than you. So you're good. But now you can do whatever you want. You will never be hungry. As far as sleep, I don't know. Let's say you don't even have to do that. You can jump out of a plane while it's going. You'll just splash in the water down below, hit the earth, and you get up, brush yourself off. You'll be all right. Be like Wolverine, right? You can get shot. Nothing happens. I don't know if it sinks into you. You pick, right? But now, what advantage do you have being immortal? There's a great Twilight Zone that's about this phenomenon where a guy is a hypochondriac, total asshole. He lives in some apartment in New York with his wife, and he has over the doctor back in the days when the doctors would make house calls. And he is so sure he's all fucked up, and the doctor's like, you're one of my healthiest patients. This is all psychosomatic. He goes, you would tell me that because you want me to die. You want me to suffer. And he's like, oh my God, So he goes, talks to the wife out in the front room, and he's like, your husband's really healthy. This is all in his head. Here's the prescription. She goes, oh, I don't know if he'll take these pills. And he goes, no, these are for you. To help ease the nerves of dealing with this asshole. So the doctor leaves. He's chastising his wife because he's a hypochondriac. And what do you know? The devil shows up in his room. The devil character, I think, was in a couple episodes, but he's absolutely a fantastic actor. Big, chunky guy. And he coerces this guy into selling his soul. Now, the guy's not stupid. He knows he's selling his soul. He knows this is the devil. But he's like, I want to be immortal. Again, there's a couple Twilight Zones where this is the case. Deals with the devil. But immediately, what I always say would happen is that you get tired of yourself. You get tired of life. You get tired of... Now, this guy was obviously extremely short-sighted in this episode. He didn't go after, something in the arts or the sciences. He didn't try to become a better person. He just tried to nickel and dime his life. But regardless of how much you're willing to participate in your immortality, there would be this point, I think, where you would get tired of all of your thoughts. You would get tired of, people dying around you for one thing. But even if everyone lived, the Q continuum, which I always reference in, I guess, the first 3 seasons pretty heavily, trying not to do it so much in season 4. But you get to a point where you need to renew. You do, right? So when I ask you, is this heaven? What do I mean? Well, again, I can't vouch for the world after this one. When we die and our soul moves on, I'm not sure. Again, got some pretty good indicators. People have come up to me who are dead and talk to me. I know that sounds nuts. If this is your first episode in here, you might want to go see the episode on Afterlife if you want to hear that story in great detail. That's the one I know it's in there. It's in a bunch of episodes, as you guys know. So I'm just trying not to bore you guys to death who've gone back to, or you continue watching and you've seen all the episodes. But there appears to be an ecosystem of being alive in a human body, which is a very finite structure, and then going on to something that is completely free of any tangible instrumentalities, as they would say in Forbidden Planet, 1956. But there seems to be a recycling, a reincarnation phase. Again, kids come into this world sometimes way beyond their years, completely articulate before 3 years old. And then some that are dumb as a bag of fucking hammers for the rest of their life. Unbelievable. And it doesn't seem to have any association with the family line, right? So you have like a family of Gumbies, and they'll pop out a genius. And you got a family of geniuses that pop out a Gumby. Gumby's a nice Monty Python reference for those of you who need to know. It's the age of the soul that seems to be different. Now, whether or not a soul or we get to say, hey, I want to intentionally go into this time frame and I want to be born into a family just like this, I don't know. Shirley MacLaine, Warren Beatty's older sister, she started a New Age movement, or at least joined a New Age movement and used her popularity to produce it in the 80s. And it was very interesting because when I first heard it, I was sort of, like a brand new Christian and at 18 years old. But even before that, I think I'd heard of it. And it just seemed like I hadn't had any thoughts in this area of my life. She had. And obviously a bunch of people that followed her had these thoughts, which is the following. as I understand it, okay? But she says that if you're poor, you've chosen to be poor. And if you are rich, you have chosen to be rich. If your life is easy, you've chosen to be on a lower level of difficulty. If your life is really difficult, you've chosen that for yourself. What does she mean? Well, as I understand it, and at first I thought she was crazy, and now it almost seems like a logical epiphany of reincarnation. And again, for the Christians that just want to slam the book shut, go ahead and slam it shut. Go ahead and push stop if it's really bothering you, because I don't want to offend you. We're way beyond, in this show, basic religions and basic man controlling man apparatus, right? The paradigms that need to be flushed down the toilet. So if you want to go on to the next level of thinking, hang on, and we're going to have some fun, right? Hopefully. But once you start contemplating infinity, and especially, again, Gene Roddenberry's invention of the Q character, the Q continuum from Next Generation, Episode 1, 1987, with Jean-Luc Picard and the team, this character didn't exist in the original script because he was supposed to have a 1-hour pilot, and I believe it's CBS came to him and said, we need 2-hour opening pilot. It's not 2 exact hours, about 45 minutes per hour combined. It's about an hour and a half with advertising consuming the other half hour. But he refused and refused and refused, and finally they cornered him and they said, we're not airing this show with that 2-hour intro. And he's like, all right. So he takes the script that this woman wrote that he loved. He thought she was the number one pick, and obviously she did a great job as well. Her name escapes me. He sat down and wrote the Q character and wrapped up the entire Next Generation series with this character. Him testing mankind to say, I don't know if you're worthy of being a part of this universe, because you seem to always gravitate to war, sort of that later down the line Fifth Element psyche. It's an old theme in film writing. But as that character continued, they loved the character and the actor that played the role, and so he continued to mature the storyline all the way up into Voyager. I can't remember if he was in Enterprise. It's just a brilliant character played by a brilliant actor, and like most things in the early Star Treks before J.J. Abrams started burning babies in the Star Trek franchise, this was amazing. But it really got you to think about infinity and thinking about, well, okay, so you get your dream. You get to live forever. You're visited by God, and God says, don't worry, man, you live forever. I can't stop you from living. This is just the way it is. Technically speaking, we're a part of each other. I have my own version of consciousness, you have yours, and so does everyone else. Maybe God says there's only one of us, and I'm just playing you in an earlier stage right now, and I'm the last one. How horrifying is that, right? But Shirley MacLaine's movement is sort of where I organically got myself when starting to really contemplate reincarnation. Because you get to these points where there's just logic gates that start turning, and you start going, well, this world changes, so if we all live forever, but we can also procreate, then we're going to have too many people on the planet really, really fast. So we need to die because we have a limited amount of real estate wherever the hell we are, right? There's a drinking game someone's going to start where I say the word planet. I would hate to contribute to your liver exploding. But you know what I mean. Limited amount of real estate, but we can procreate. All right. That's not going to ever work, so we have to die in this form. Again, die is something I don't want any one of you to think as a true, it's based like a true finality. To finish my sentence, we are butterflies that come out of worms, and the butterfly goes off to be perhaps another worm again, maybe some cycle. I don't know if infinity truly exists in the physical form. My brain can really conceive of that. My brain actually can only theoretically conceive of the mind-numbing concept that numbers go up forever, they go negative forever, and they're divisible forever, right? Remember, Bitcoin was sold to you because it had a fixed number of Bitcoins, any one of them out there. But then when they added divisible fractional ownership, they then screwed it up with an infinite supply. It's no longer any better than just a fiat currency. So don't believe the hype until someone locks one in and says, no, there's no infinity model on our currency. Why they haven't decided to do like a fixed amount of currency for everyone who joins a currency, I don't know, right? So there's 10,000 Bitcoins created for every human being that joins the Bitcoin ecosystem. And if someone stops trading in it, you reduce it by 10,000, something like that. It's really strange. But anyway, back to Shirley MacLaine. So you're on the other side. You're a soul. I'm really hoping, that we have a tremendous amount of accessibility to information on the other side. Because it'd be a bummer to have all these, were dinosaurs a bunch of bullshit? Is Eric Debay right? I like to have that answer. I think I have the answer now, but, it'd be nice to just have it definitively there, right? But now you would be in a different state of mind. And I'm going to give you an analogy I was given about God probably in 1990. And it was the following. When we're trying to conceive of God viewing time and viewing us from his vantage point. And again, I say he just for the lack of a better gender, right? I think my youth minister was copying someone else's story, but he said, envision a train car, like a train. And let's just say, for the sake of simplicity, has 5 cars on it. That represents 5 decades of life. And you're going to get into the car eventually here when you stop at the next station and go into your 60s. So don't think this is like someone who's only living 50 years. But you are a passenger on the train. When you're standing there, you're looking straight ahead at the next door on the other car. And it takes you 10 years to get to the door to go into the next car. Okay. God is looking down on the cars with no tops on them. So God can see the whole thing at once. So time for God in this analogy is instantaneous and 100%. Whatever God would focus on is where his eyes are going, and he can pay attention to something that you need. He can look ahead to protect you. He can look back and enjoy whatever you've done to make yourself interesting, right? Now, who knows how much of your life you keep in terms of your recognition on the other side? Again, Walt Disney hanging out at Disneyland, the only park he ever participated in building, says volumes for me personally. There's this whole thing with the movie Poltergeist, which I think is extremely interesting. This notion that you have essentially the ability to stay on Earth after your body passes. It's like maybe it's an option. Maybe there aren't hard rules. You pass and you're sitting there looking around like all those movies where, people don't see you anymore, but you're there. But some of us with open minds and long hair, I don't know what it is. We have the antenna and they come up to you and go, Bob Gurr's over there. Why don't you go say hi? That changes things because that's a very specific thing, isn't it? It's someone staying in their previous identity as a human being, even though they're obviously no longer a human being. Now, they're no longer a human being in physical form, but they may be a human being in soul form and spiritual form. Maybe there's not a big difference between us as souls and us as human beings. God, I hope so. But maybe that's silly thinking. Again, it's just to briefly digress into an example here. Any of you who play video games and you play a game for a long time and it's really hard, but then you download cheat codes and you get into God mode and now you can slaughter everything instantaneously. It's fun for about 10 to 15 minutes and then you tend to never need to play the game again because you've just had it completely at your fingertips. So my concern is that life may need to protect itself from ever reaching that God level, because if you were to be a spirit, whether you be in human form or in free-flowing soul form, and you get to the point where there's like, I've done it all, right? The Q continuum, you've done it all. You've had every conversation. You've been in every nook and cranny in the universe. There is nothing that's a mystery. You've even dabbled in creation yourself. You don't want to get bored of the options that you have available, right? Be like living in a town where the movie theater has one movie, there's one restaurant that serves one meal. You know what I'm saying, right? Maybe it doesn't drive you crazy if you've not known multiple choices. Maybe that's just some drony existence that's okay relative to your previous knowledge, right? But now, if you're a spirit, and this is an ecosystem by which, you're sort of like, you're popping out of your body, and I always envision, it's like, and this is based on some information I got from a friend of mine in Ireland. She was telling me she takes care of hospice places. And she said when someone dies, she said there's two things that always happen in a hospice. She goes, the room will smell like really clean plastic, just instantaneously. Which you'd think when a body passes away, it loses its bodily functions, clean plastic would be the last smell you'd get. She says everybody talks about it. She said, too, a lot of us get the sense that the family of the person is in the room instantaneously. Even workers that are atheists get this feeling. And so when you're in a community of people that are constantly dealing with the transformation of human soul held down by the mortal coil and then being freed, and then these other folks arriving, it's very enchanting on several levels. It speaks to an ecosystem, right? Well, we're going to go down and watch Grandpa. We're going to, greet Grandpa as soon as he passes or whatever. And again, I think this happens under all circumstances. So, if there's some tragic sudden death or something, it's probably extra like this, right? And there have been some fake videos online of people using special effects to insert visions of people after deaths have occurred. I would stick with your personal eyewitness situations and your friends that you can trust, right? But your past, and these folks are there, it's probably custom to your personal desires, right? If you wanted to meet your family, you probably meet your family. If you don't really know your family, but you have a bunch of heroes who have passed, maybe they greet you, like your favorite musician or whatever, some scientist or something. Maybe your old buddies, and I'm sure that you have the option to wait for them as well. The other big question, which is related to the train analogy, is when you pass, time is definitely in reality a true illusion as a I would say something tangible, but it is something that we conceptualize because we do know that things change states. I was a lot smaller when I was a baby, and I'm going to be a shrinkled up old dude at some point, hopefully, when I pass away. Okay. This show has a beginning, middle, and end. You get me. When we go into the other realm, it's hard to conceive if you really need to tangibly hold it in your mind, right? But it might just be as simple as this. I simply tell you, when you get to the other side, really, we don't really have any concept of time. Yeah, you could sit around and nitpick your existence and say, well, I was talking to this person in the morning as a soul, and then I talked to that soul person second. But there's no clocks, there's no day, and there's no night. I don't know if what I'm saying is actually true, but it's less tangible because there's less instrumentalities, right? This reality that we have. And so if you're now looking at the earth, and maybe there's a lot of other places as well, I don't know, let's just stick with where we are, and you see time. You see the beginning of man, or however that occurred, divine creation with some UFO, splicing in there, whatever. You might find an era that is very interesting, and to you personally, go, I think I'd like to do this. Let me just get sort of a middle America, mom and pop. I don't want to be stuck there, terrified to travel. So let's make sure they have a reason to move around. Let's look at their lives and where we think it's going to go. I want to be their kid. Don't care if I'm a boy or girl. Let that be random. Maybe if they want a boy, we'll just go ahead and do that. Maybe it's out of your control. But you insert yourself in time, and there's just a general algorithm that you can run that says this is probably going to be about this stuff. You could live your life one way. Like if I stayed in my hometown, I don't know exactly what I would be doing, but I might have stayed on level 4. with the economy bouncing up and down. Hell, maybe it's 11. I don't know. But what I did end up doing by moving from a very secure hometown to the West Coast at 17, with barely any money in my pocket, it was very tough at times, right? The sacrifices I made from a normal life for this life are massive, and they're permanent. I've lost opportunities that my friends had that they took advantage of. But they look at me and they're like, well, I would have loved to live some of that life. And I'm looking at their life going, I wish I had lived theirs, right? But the Shirley MacLaine idea, or whomever she follows to have her ideas, looking down, I do believe that there's some sensibility to the notion that we could pick where we start our lives. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. Well, that makes no goddamn sense at all because of one specific reason. Children are born into absolutely horrid conditions. Some people become the son of Sam. They start abusing animals because they're beaten by their parents, neglected by their parents, whatever. They got some bad genes because mom and dad were drinking the night that they were conceiving. Who knows, right? Who would ever pick that? Well, what's interesting about some of the fictional takes on this, especially the Twilight Zone that I was talking about. The gentleman that was a hypochondriac who sold his soul to the devil in some twist of fate. And here he was trying to get well, but he constantly was saying he was sick. The very next time you see him after he sells his soul, he's at a subway. And he's standing next to a bunch of people. And as soon as the train comes by, he throws himself in front of the train, trying to kill himself. But he knows he's immortal. And so all that happens is it tears up his suit, and then he collects from the insurance agency who comes to his house. And the insurance agents are literally lined up in the hallway, all paying off near-death experiences because he keeps doing crazy shit. Well, eventually, he gets to a point where he's bored to death of life because he can only conceive of, in this sort of limited intellectual, spectrum of this fictional character, he can't conceive of, again, learning how to play piano, all the stuff that Bill Murray did in Groundhog Day, which I think would be your bare minimum. But even if you do that, you're going to reach a point where you're bored to death of at least what you can do on this planet. You're going to need to travel the stars or figure out what all that is out there to probably have a new paradigm of existence that's entertaining, right? There was another character in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy in the last two books who was an immortal, and Douglas Adams thought it through, the writer, and he's created a character that traveled the universe and insulted every being in the universe in alphabetical order. And so he eventually finds our main character, Arthur Dent, and insults him. He just lands in a spaceship, comes out and insults him. So the reason why I give you these examples is very specific. You'd be Mr. Nice Guy eating your ice cream and all this other stuff up to a point, and then you'll become the bad guy. There's a lot of video games out there where they give you a choice. And again, I always lean on the ones that I play. Fallout 4 by Bethesda, which I think released in, was it 2015? You have 3 different scenarios at the end of the game. It's a really long game. It's a huge world. And usually if you talk to someone who's still playing it to this day, they all have the same story. Well, I ended it, in those 3 different scenarios so I could see what was going on. Then I got bored, and I killed everybody in the game. Now, the game actually keeps some key characters alive. All you can do is shoot them, and they kind of kneel down. And you can continue shooting them, but they'll never die. And then they heal up, and then they're your buddy next time you come through town. But we see human beings doing this all the time, going after the dark side. Well, why do that? Because they're bored, man. They're bored. So why does the slumdogs of India exist? Why would anyone want to be born a Haitian child that the Clinton Foundation comes and kidnaps and sells you into some organ harvesting thing or some sex trafficking thing? Because they're bored. Believe it or not. Now, the other more Matrix version of this, which I'm going to stay away from in this episode, but I want to acknowledge it, is my version of the NPC prior to the most romantic version of the NPC, which is your sort of your media puppets and your political puppets. My NPC version is, this is sort of like a Westworld where we don't have the outside human area and the inside android area. We have it all mixed together. And I'm not saying anyone's androids, I'm just saying they're biological puppets to create the fictional tension that the Greek gods used to do in the proverbial Clash of the Titans stadium. You know, they just put little pawns down there, and you're real, and then they introduce a bunch of fictional monsters and characters to create tension in your life, so you have some reward mechanism, right? So you're like, oh, that was hard, but then I succeeded. You might be competing against another full-living, soul-bound, symbiotic human, or you might just be dealing with an AI. Who knows, right? But now, what's the point of the episode? Is this heaven? Doesn't sound like I've really addressed the question. Well, I've hinted at this in other episodes, and I want to put it like a super duper fine point on it, which is, what if everything I've said is the way that it is? And what does that mean? I just realized you can see the camera on me. If you know as a human being that this is a temporary finite life, you're born, you live, and you die. Maybe you get to 130 if you're some super lucky person living up in the hills and you have no challenges in life. But hell, maybe you die as a young kid of some, GMO cancer. But you enter back into the beautiful green room of life, which is where your soul goes. Hey, you're greeted by your family. In fact, you may even meet family you never knew you had, So you're up there. And as soon as you cross over into that realm, the memories that you didn't have access to as a human being because of this constraint of this mortal coil, right? It all comes back to you. Maybe you have a different name in the other world. All right, so you're chilling out and you pick where you're going to go, whether or not you're a spider, a human, you're on planet Earth, planet Xenon, whatever. And let's say you could retain that knowledge. You're going to come back and you're going to remember, oh yeah. One of the reasons why I think, I'm starting to suspect, one of the reasons why children cry so much when they are born is that they potentially remember the blissful nature of where they came from. And yeah, they're interested in this universe. I don't really know if all the assumptions about a child's ability to see clearly, hear clearly, that sort of thing is an issue, but we know they can't walk. They can't hold their head up initially. They can't communicate effectively. But they're getting hungry. They're getting tired. And it must be an extremely frustrating thing the more you have a grasp of where you were. Could be that if your soul is new, which, again, I'm not sure where souls would come from if that's the case. Could simply be a lack of experience that makes you new. You're infinitely old, but you've never been a human before. You've been digging on being insects for a while, right? But you come into this world, you shake off all of the knowledge that you have, all the blissful answers that you have, and you might even just wake up every day and you just continually realize that you're forgetting who you are as a baby. And eventually you forget so much that you accept who you are because that's all you can remember. Is being a human being now. What's my name again? Oh yeah, that's my name. And that name sucks. Wow. Where do I live again? Oh, at least that's good. But what if you could keep it full lucidity? And again, we think there's people, little kids, that have kept their faculties. For whatever reason, they're well within their kind of 5 to 12 realm. And they're telling their parents, look, I used to live over there. That's my old village over there. And they're like, oh, yeah? And they take the kid over there, and the kid's like, yeah, that's so-and-so, 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 that's my father, blah, blah, blah. Ask them, they lost their kid, and they ask the people in the village, and they're like, yeah, you mean that's him? Oh, my God. There's a real famous one from Mexico when I was a kid, and the most recent one I've mentioned was a kid in England. Sometimes they get a bunch right, and sometimes they get more than you would get if you hadn't been telling the truth to some regard, like 40 to 60%. It's pretty damn accurate when it comes to saying, I've never left this house because I'm a child, and I'm telling you that on the coast there's a big red, lighthouse with a red house, and there's a basement that has a pool table in it, and there's 2 girls, 3 boys, and da-da-da. They may not remember the names properly. Maybe they hybrid the neighbor with the family or something like this, but they're pretty damn accurate. But if that's it, think about it. You go through some form of symbiotic relationship with a physical being in this ether-based universe. You live a finite life. Your soul, it doesn't have any relationship in terms of its dependency and strategic resources to exist with anything this universe actually provides to be physical, quote unquote, right? But through the brain stem and the pineal gland, it attaches to this life force, feeds it, gives it consciousness. You can have this temporary run because in this world, things have a beginning, middle, and end. It's what you need, because if you knew everything, you would need to not know everything, right? That's the whole thing about being reincarnated. I think we need to reset, as I've said in several shows. My question is, let's contemplate for a second. We don't forget. We just keep coming back, like Groundhog Day, or especially the Twilight Zone that Groundhog Day was based on, where a guy wakes up in a court and he's being sentenced to the electric chair. But everyone in the room reshuffles. So the judge one day is his death row inmate buddy. On the next day is his attorney on the next day. And he just keeps waking up. As soon as he's burned up in the electric chair, he wakes up in the defendant's chair. And he's sentenced again. And he just laughs. And he's trying to short circuit the thing. He wants the nightmare to end. How would we change our lives if we knew this was the way it works? That's the point of the episode. I think human beings wait around for something to happen. But then again, I think that human beings think that we have this ultimate goal. Maybe we don't, right? Maybe there is no ultimate goal. Maybe it's just be alive, have an experience, learn something new. And with every single variable that's going on in this universe, which is like, Christ, forget universe, just this plane of existence that we are in. Think about the infinite variables. A piano only technically has 12 notes. It's spread out into several octaves, but there's only really 12 notes. Well, it served us pretty good. The record industry and trivial producers will cannibalize other songs and make it feel like there actually is a huge problem with the limitation of notes. But when you follow a true master musician like a Prince or someone, or a Mozart, you start to understand that there are ways to get around the reuse of old music. Well, we don't have 12 notes in this plane of existence. We have trillions upon quadrillions times each other squared of options. You were born into a physical place. You're born into a different body with different parents, different food supplies, different technologies. You live in, a place where it's hard to live, or you live in a place that's easy to live. You have the intelligence to get a job in the, boomer bust cycle that global banks allow you to have. There's just tons and tons and tons. In one life, you feel totally loved. In another life, you don't feel that loved at all. And, you're born without a family that you can relate to, and then you make your own family because you marry and you have some kids. I don't need the previous weirdos that took care of me when I was a kid. I made my own family, right? And we live according to our standards, whatever that is, right? I talked to a brilliant guy at my smoke lounge a couple days ago, and just a treat. He is a real estate economist, and in Orange County, California, for those of you who don't know, we're a wild bizarre prime market area of the world. Everyone wants to live here all the time. No matter where you're from in the world, they buy houses here. And so we are insulated in the real estate market from a lot of the economic vacillations that the world banks push on us, right? But you're going to get a kick out of this for those of you who have seen all the episodes, because I just gave this example, this real life example of a friend of mine in the San Francisco area when I was really like South Bay, Palo Alto area. But I'm working at this pharmaceutical company. I got this buddy. He's probably about 20 years older than me. But he invites me over to dinner because he and I were just chumming around, constantly eating lunch like 5 days a week together. And he's like, "You should come over and meet my wife and we'll eat some dinner." And I did. And he explained to me at the dinner table, because he lived in this teeny tiny apartment with almost nothing in it. And I was like, "Wow, your chick is really cool to live in a place with nothing here." And he goes, "Well, what we do is we save up for a year and a half to 2 years, and we go to these crazy islands in the Pacific where all we do is fish. We sell some of the fish to the market, we take the fish that we need to eat, and the day repeats. And we live there for a couple years at a time because you don't really need much money to exist." I think he was saying it's something like $35 a day just to rent the place where he lives. But he's also selling fish, so he's offsetting whatever savings he brings there. But my friend told me this analogy. He goes, "Well, have you heard the fishing story?" And I was like, "Well, I don't know. You're talking about Jesus and No, I'm not talking about that." He tells me the exact same story. He goes, the guy that fishes was, his fictional version of it, the guy's fishing, does what my buddy's doing. Again, he catches enough for himself and his wife and his family or whatever, sells the rest to the market, and he's good till the end of the day. But this person from the Western world comes up to this character and says, "Well, have you ever thought about getting up a little bit earlier and fishing a little bit longer and then selling more of that fish to the market such that you have a little bit more money, and then maybe you could save up that money and buy a boat and get a crew, and you could just build an empire of fishing in this area?" Now, what is the guy selling him? Selling him this bullshit paradigm of work, 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 work. It's the disease of mankind right now. And so I looked at this guy and I said, because we're on the same wavelength completely, and I said, I just did an episode where I said that this guy met in an Uber, and he talks to his Uber guys too. I said, the dude's moving back to the jungles of Vietnam because he's sick and tired of the Bay Area. And he said, they only make $2.50 a day, but they enjoy their lives, and they get to see their family all day long. They work together. And I said, I think the world is under the misconception that we're super intellectual and that working constantly is somehow this big achievement in the development of mankind. Now, if your work is something that you love, you're in the right zone, right? Provided you can provide for yourself, right? But most of us work for some sort of corporation. Now, sometimes you can work for a corporation that's owned by a single individual that you respect. It's all good. That tends to be the ones that I gravitate to in my later years, if it's not my own. But when I said this thing about us being sort of a fake intellectual, he immediately said, "Yeah, isn't it right?" And this guy's very, very successful. He sees, giant real estate deals constantly in Orange County. So he's hobnobbing with some folks that are moving and shaking, as it would be to the standards of today, right? I think that if we were to wake up tomorrow and realize that this is a cyclical thing, you're reincarnated. This is what you have access to as a physical being. Again, we can't claim to know all the details of what it's like to be on the other side. I think we have evidence of all kinds of things on the other side. Those who've taken DMT trips and meet beings made of light, meeting sort of, alien feeling beings. Hell, maybe that's who we are when we're on the other side. Who knows, right? We're trying to survive this world with the most the highest sense of accomplishment, and I think with a level of happiness that is whatever we feel like makes us happy, right? We're all different in our definitions of what what food tastes good, what food tastes bad, and what's considered a rewarding end of the day, right? I think that one, I think it's very difficult to do what I'm saying. To wake up the next day and go, wow, this is a cyclical thing, and I can relax a little bit. Take a little bit of the stress off. This whole idea of working, 12 hours a day because somehow that makes you a better human being. Well, I wouldn't say it makes you a better human being necessarily. Maybe you've had some issues in the past, and that is a regiment that shakes any of the procrastinating anomalies out of your life. But we live too fast, which, just like Roy Batty in Blade Runner, Dr. Tyrell says to him, look, the candle that burns twice as bright, Bryant, burns half as long, and Roy, you have burned so very bright, haven't you? And so, again, I give those little hometown analogies, right, about what it's like to be in a small town and the beautiful nature of moving slower. It is instantaneously recognizable when I go back to my hometown. And in case you're wondering, look, dude, you go on about your hometown a lot. Why don't you just move back? Shut up already, right? What ends up happening when you live 30 years in one place, like I've lived here. In fact, I've lived at this particular location longer than I've lived any other place in my entire life because I've always been forced to be a little transient, right? I now have family friends here that if I move back to the Midwest, I won't be able to, it'll be difficult to come and see them. And it would be rare. And I'd rather be in their lives at the drop of a dime. I can go just drive to their house. Hey, there's an event tonight, there's an award ceremony, or there's a movie to premiere. I'd rather have that close-knit thing with the friends that I have here. Now, if they move on in life, they pass away, or they move on in life, or what have you, then maybe I would consider such a thing. But again, the resources that I need to live my life are here. The challenge, is for some of you that live in these nice, slower communities, whether it be in Europe or wherever you are in the world, America, I envy the fact that you can live this more balanced, calm life. You can go earn your money. The inequality of money that is created by the bankers doesn't get a hold of you, meaning the father can go and earn one paycheck and pay for everything that the family needs. The big scam was, in the 70s, this inflation of our money happened so quickly that the value of the dollar went down, and that's why the females had to go work, because it simply started to crumble. But we didn't understand anything about economics, so we let it happen to us, right? But when you live in the big city or by a big metropolitan area, I think you know right away, the second you get in your car and you get stuck in jam traffic and you look at the rat race, well, maybe we have sold ourselves a bag of shit, right? Maybe this isn't really worth going home and bragging about, right? Which I think the bragging thing ends about the age of 30, right? You realize the rat race sucks and you want out of the rat race, right? But the other big thing that comes with this notion of, is this it? Is this heaven? Meaning there is none. Is how we treat each other. I think, one of the biggest epiphanies that I think would shock the entire universe would be if all of us learned that there's only one of us. So when you're mean to someone else and you feel bad about it, it's because you actually were mean to yourself. If time isn't a constraint for the soul, then there is no birth of a soul. It's just we're seeing ourselves in different stages. Because time, technically speaking, in any sense of its definition, is infinitely divisible, like the number set, well, there's infinite levels of us growing. But even if there is a huge number of souls in this universe, whether it be infinite or a lot, whether there's a machine that cranks them out, God's pulling a little bit off part of himself off and just throwing it into the universe, whether that's the case, it would probably relate to the afterlife as to how we would treat each other in this life. I gave an analogy, I don't know, 10 episodes ago about being in traffic in Los Angeles and the fact that you could flip the bird at somebody, preferably someone who doesn't have tattoos all over their face. And as a seasoned citizen of a big city, you know you'll never see him again. So go ahead, be a jerk, because you'll never see anyone again. In your mind, as a human being, that's what you think. And then you flip to the other side, you realize, oh my God, I have access to everyone at the same exact time. What is hell? Well, hell would be, how did you treat people when you were a human being in this particular cycle of your infinite continuum life? Do you need to say you're sorry to a few folks? I definitely would. Especially just my critique of other human beings while I'm driving. They have no idea I'm critiquing them. But I cast aspersions on their ability to drive sometimes. I think we all do it, right? But if we understood that we're going to see everyone after this world, would there ever be a serial killer? Would there ever be some sort of crazy leader that commits genocide? Would a warlord be so easily bought off if you said, okay, we're going to give you and yours 3 generations of a tremendous amount of money, and hey, as long as you can educate your kids with that money, they might be able to hang on to it for 30 generations. But don't hold your breath. Your kids will be stupid if everything's given to them, right? But we're going to give you this money, and you're going to go over to the tribe next to you. You guys are 99.9%, carry the 9, almost infinitely, exactly genetically the same. But I've indoctrinated you to believe that they're stupid and you're smart. Or it's just simply the price you have to pay in order to get this short-term burst in your life. But the human being that you're talking to, this warlord, wherever they are, Afghanistan, Africa, wherever, some gangster in America, and they look at you and they go fuck yourself. What, I'm gonna do this on your behalf as some mercenary for your fucking banker shit. And then when I go to the other side, I'm the one staring all these people in the face. And even though you're the one that paid me, I was the guy that compromised my sensibility of right and wrong so I could get a short-term gain for this tiny little journey. Now, a fundamentalist might simply say, yeah, but what matters? Maybe they chose that difficult path. Maybe they chose to be murdered by the tribe that murdered them. Take the Shirley MacLaine thing and push it to the max, right? That's sort of what she says. So is anyone accountable for anything? We would need information from the other side and to really have a sensibility of the do's and don'ts. But now here's the thing. The notion of right or wrong is, and I have an episode that I'm very proud of called Good and Evil, which you should go listen to if you dig this kind of conversation. I think it's back in season 1. Can't remember. It's a very fascinating biological thing that's happening, and potentially it's all soul driven. I don't know. Again, when the Asians say, how's your gut feel about the decision you're going to make? I think that's a reference to the soul more than a reference to the body. Why does that feeling occur? You ever think about that? What, good and bad? Really? I mean, good and bad, you might be able to boil down in a really remedial understanding that would say to you, oh, it is based on your personal gain or loss. I get this if I do this, and I'm greedy, and I'm a human being, and I'm feral, and that's why I have a sense of right and wrong. But I think everyone who listens to this show, and I think most of the beings in the universe, they reach a point where right and wrong is the definition of nuance. It is the definition of nuance, isn't it? Hurting someone's feelings. Well, the only reason why you would be concerned about hurting someone's feelings is that you empathetically understand what it's like for your feelings to be hurt. If you envision yourself stealing something out of someone's house, you go over to your friend's house. So you don't have a really super strong connection just yet. It's your buddy that has the super strong connection. And you're looking around their house, and man, there's just trinkets everywhere that you would love. And you take one, or you consider taking one. You realize that person may love that thing, And you envision, if you have a moral base, them discovering that it's missing and having their heart broken. Even if to you it doesn't make any sense. I do think that there's an IQ rating that is related to your sensibility of those things in a lot of cases. But you can have folks with super low IQs that are just good people because they can't conceive of being bad. And then you have your low IQs that can't conceive of being good. They have no sense of right or wrong, right? When I was at Electronic Arts, there was a famous scenario where these guys at Electronic Arts would have like cubes with tons of stuff, very valuable models and things. And there was a guy that won the Bay Area award for the coolest cube, right? But the guys would be like Star Wars fans, and they would have all the little Star Wars characters that they got out of the 80s, and they collect them and buy them. And stuff would started going missing. And so at one point, one of the guys had his little Yoda character stolen. It just was missing. And it just so happened that his cube had a camera on it as part of the security system. So he went to security, he had the camera rolled back, and it was the cleaning staff, right? The immigrant cleaning staff that came in, and we watched a mother. They brought their little kids with them, right? Bad combination. The kid wanted the toy. And so the mother, without even thinking, took the Yoda doll and just gave it to the kid, not realizing that thing's probably $200 or $300 because they don't make it anymore. It's a limited edition. It's got the better of the better thing on it, his little cloth thing on it, right? That person couldn't conceive of the frustration of having an item stolen. Or perhaps they said in their brain, these are the haves, we're the have-nots. We have a socialistic mindset, and we're going to take from the rich and give to the poor. Don't know exactly what was going on there. But there was no sense of right and wrong. So there's a point where you advance up to a point where you would never do that because you understand the dimensionality of the crime, right? This is why we have to educate the entire world. I mean, all solutions in this whole planet is up to education. But now let's jump off on education with the realms of which we discussed several times on this show, all the cerebral stuff that's more advanced, right? You know that if you were to go to Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Stanford, UCLA, Berkeley, you grab all of their stuff, Oxford, Cambridge, you grab all of their academic enrollment options, meaning every class that exists at these universities, and you lay it all out. And you take an average conversation like the one that we have on this show, which again for us is an average conversation, contemplating that of which is barely discussed in society. I'm going to take a guess. Maybe Berkeley, maybe Stanford will have these existential classes where they get into the deep-rooted possibilities. But the classes I have actually talked to people about attending at various bizarre universities that are more open-minded, and I would say bizarre is a good thing, the teachers have to write their syllabus to the class. I've done this several times myself. You have to tell the university what you're teaching, because they have to make sure you're going to actually give some sort of beneficial byproduct at the end of the class or lecture or whatever you're doing. There's usually a paradigm limitation, because the class has to, in the eyes of the university, it has to come to some crescendo of payoff, aka value, which is why you attended the class in the first place. Think about it. You study history. What sector of history we're going to study? We're going to study the 1900s in America. Okay. So you got 1800 to 1899. You got to know everything that we deem to be significant and relevant to today or whatever in those time frames. Maybe just study the Civil War for a year. But in our realm, we're dealing with unknowns. And that's very atypical of any academic institution, right? You might say, well, dude, there's theoretical physics classes. Yes, there are. And what you are studying in theoretical physics class are the theories that are now a finite postulation by either a single human being or a group of human beings that theorize something out of thin air, which is fantastic. They have studied it up to a point, and you may be invited as a student of a class like this to write a thesis in a particular direction. This is usually where you get your PhDs. But think about it. You got to stay in school for 6 years before you can even enroll in a PhD level class. And so what about those first 6 years? You're really going to battle through those first 6 years to just have your mind open for the very first time? This should be taught in grade school, in my opinion, where you have a class that you simply prove to the institution and society as a whole that you have contemplated a particular concept to the point of you understanding the theories that exist today up to this point regarding what you're talking about, and then you were able to use your intelligence coupled with your smartness, right? The first stage would be learning what had been done, and that's your smartness, right? Memorize and repeat stuff. Then your intelligence is going to get involved with the causality model of why these things are related, and you will test it out with your intellectual capacity to say, do I agree? You were taught that a redshift in starlight, indicates that it's going away. And if you see a blue shift, it indicates it's coming close to you. Well, that's the theory, right? Einstein propagated that theory. And so that's how we determine whether or not the universe is expanding or contracting, whether something's going away at a particular speed. It's like a quasar in the edge of the universe, the edge of the perceivable universe going, 2 times the speed of light away from us when nothing's supposed to be able to hit warp 1. The reason I mentioned the academic side of this discussion is because God, I hate saying that, is due to the fact that we need to, I think, create a paradigm, sort of a virtual classroom in our brains, such that when we find a like-minded person that is willing to have these advanced discussions about what could be, again, not needing a tangible breadcrumb trail to something that you can hang on to, right? This microphone I can touch. It's got physicality to it. Well, we can have a lot of discussions about the analog signal that comes up through this microphone. That makes us feel comfortable because it really exists in our minds, right? But if I say, how do you explain a ghost? How do you explain seeing someone who's recently passed talking to you? And later you find out they've passed, right? You didn't know ahead of time. What do we do then? Well, we're taught, I think, by those that research nothing and know everything. The classic example of sort of the pining to be truly human and intellectual people on this planet, that if we can't live in some super tangible paradigm of thinking and existence, that we are the ones that maybe in extreme forms were chastised, but if nothing else, we're no longer compatible with these individuals unless we dumb down out of that advanced thinking. And I only say advanced in 2018 because it is an advanced form of thinking, to think in the intangible on a routine basis. You still get up, put your shoes on, go live your life. So you have to be living in the tangible realm up to a point. But I think that most of you who listen to these particular episodes and you get off on it, it's really stimulating your brain. A lot of the comments that come in from time to time are, oh my God, I've been thinking about this for a really long time. Never found anyone else that just brazenly gets out there and talks about it and endorses it and makes me feel comfortable for having these thoughts that I can't tell my spouse, I can't tell my kids, can't tell my friends because they'll think I'm cuckoo, right? Think about the average development of the university. The word comes out of the Greek history. Well, at some point, someone said, you know what? I know some stuff. You know some stuff. He, she, whatever. They know a bunch of stuff. And you know how we sit around and break bread and talk. But it's all based on our friendships, right? We only get to have the information and have this great conversation if we are sharing friendships. Wouldn't it be nice to have an arbitrary place we could go where, regardless if we have a pre-existing relationship with each other, we can enroll and sit down and meet new people and get, lessons on engineering, mathematics, biology, whatever. And so the university is created. Okay, so we've done that once. It's the method by which we educate each other. Don't forget the little tiny towns in the Midwest when they were conquering the United States of America. God bless the Native Americans. But even your struggling farmer trying to find a plot of land, get the deed to the land, they till it, they put the crops down, all this other stuff. You had an era in American history where there were no schools because the settlers were like, I'm going to teach you, I'm your mother, I'm your father, whatever. Typically the moms had the arduous task of raising the kids and educating them at the same time. But a lot of people just learned their trade skill. Kids just grew up and knew how to farm. They learned it from their fathers, who learned it from their fathers, etc., etc. The girls learned how to cook by learning it from their mothers and mothers and mothers and mothers. But eventually, they had these little farm schools. Sometimes they cannibalized a church. So 5 days a week it was a school, and then 2 days a week it was a religious institution. We are now at the Great Awakening, right? Well, what does that mean? Does it mean watching a bunch of conspiracy theory videos or videos like this and then trying to remember this stuff so that when you apply it to your life, when you wake up in the morning, you've got some enhanced vision of, how to live your life? Maybe change the way you live your life, simplify your life, hopefully, and get more out of it. That's only going to work for so long. We are, in my opinion, in the awakening. We are without school. We are the settlers that are simply passing it between each other in an extremely informal manner. And I think we need to start the conversation about how we can institutionalize these moments. Now, there are great institutions, whether or not you believe in their stuff or not. There's MUFON and ufology stuff. There are David Icke's crowd, which go to see him personally for whatever he believes. And again, hopefully everyone's taking what they can absorb and keeping their mind open to things they can't understand. Now, institutions and schools need a booming economy because that's what kept the settlers from creating these institutions right away. Now, the church, typically there was a band of churches that wanted to spread Christianity because it's a control apparatus, right? So, it took a while for the Catholic Church to infiltrate America and build, big, giant, beautiful buildings that were called cathedrals or whatever, churches of Christianity, of Catholicism, excuse me. We don't have a method of doing this easily right now, right? You guys watch videos, banners show up. I get a few pennies and that kind of stuff. There's Patreon pages for various followers, but it pretty much, you would need millions and millions of people contributing to this before you're going to get ancillary cash that someone's going to part with to try and formalize this. But a physical building is old school, right? We're all online now. So how did the awakening occur? I know we're kind of off the track, but if you dug the first hour of this conversation and you want it to perpetuate and mature, and you want other people's opinions to be involved, what do you have to do? At a minimum, you must discuss it with someone else. Again, take the subjects that you're very intimately, I think, curious about, because you will have a lot of unresolved issues in your brain. Like there's folks that, when I first started the show, there were a lot of requests from people to talk about the afterlife. I mean, requests. I get these messages. I am dealing with a fear of death, a fear of the afterlife. But I also haven't thought about it a lot. So do you have anything related to this subject matter? And I eventually made the episode. I made a series of episodes that I think are valuable. There have been at least 2 folks that were regular viewers of this show and my previous show, MK Ultra Radio, that eventually said, you know what, I could do this. And they made their own shows. And just fascinating. In fact, I want to give Jed big props because he has a fantastic show. It's just GED, which I believe are his initials. But he's all over history. He lives in Scotland, and he is just... he's really just owned his life and made it just... he was already cool to start out with, but he's really just augmented himself in so many ways, and he's carrying a whole narrative in his realm. He's sort of, I think, a very skilled mythbuster that I can actually support, you know. And it doesn't matter if you agree with him or not, he will get you to think, and that's all we're trying to do, right at this point. Part of the awakening is to blow the dust off the machinery and get the thing to move. So I think that one of the analogies you could draw from like the Wizard of Oz is that when they found the Tin Man, you could see he had a previous life, but he was frozen because he had rusted. And he was saying, oil can, you know, and they finally got the oil can and spritzed him up a little bit, and all of a sudden he started moving, and then all of a sudden he was alive again. But then he was in a second tier of his life, which is to say, you know, but he wanted a heart, right, or something like that. Or I think the lion wanted courage, the scarecrow wanted a brain. So as we wake up, we're getting oiled. We're shaking off this debilitating paradigm adoption, which is the rust in our system, right? In the next 10 to 20 years, hopefully there's a change in society if we can get these globalists the fuck off our backs, right? The problem with globalists is they're typically complete fucking sellouts as human beings, right? They'll sell their country out, they'll sell you out, they'll sell your kids out. Yeah, give those kids vaccinations, let them eat cake, right? Full of a bunch of GMO bullshit, right? But once we get them to disappear, and the oligarchy and the aristocrats of the world that think they know best, but they don't have any idea what it's like to be you. They don't have any idea what it's like to struggle like you. Their one-size-fits-all solutions for life will eventually boil off. And then we have to take control. Well, it's not like we're going to get a call or some text on our telephone. It's all yours, guys. Go for it. No. You're going to have to do what France is doing. You're going to have to rebel away from the paradigms that are controlling you and communicate with each other, most likely beforehand. And we're going to have to formalize somehow what we're talking about in these episodes so that we can figure out the ecosystem of who we are, right? Let me close on this idea. Give an example of the benefit of one of these changes. If we got what we were looking for, some eccentric billionaire said, you know what, I dig this, I'm going to put up some money, I'm going to take care of your salaries and all this other stuff. Find a little place in Orange County, California, or wherever in the world this person is, they want to contribute. And go get the people with the knowledge. Go get people that can run experiments based on your hypotheses. And we said, okay, and they say, well, what would be your first thing that you would go after, right? We can toss it up. We can make divisions, right? If you want to have a zero-point energy system because you want to get rid of the oil companies, you're going to draw a lot of attention, and they're going to try to kill everybody off. It's just going to happen. All right, so maybe that's a covert little project on the side. But one of the ones we could do related to this episode is to figure out whether or not we are a symbiotic creature, whether or not we have evidence. And I think we do. But how would we put it in a bottle, so to speak, such that a person who's randomly coming in off the streets could see what we have done in terms of research and be convinced fairly quickly there's something to this, right? Again, if I had this surveillance video from, it was either end of 2007, I think it was end of 2007, of being in Disneyland and walking from the bank directly to Bob Gurr in, I guess, I don't even know if it's Tomorrowland or Fantasyland, the Nemo ride, just straight to the guy. And I had that on video. That'd be a great piece of evidence to say, look, you see, I'm not bullshitting you. This happened. Even was witnessed by two other people besides he and I. But who knows? Who knows if there are other folks in the world that have already done these tests. They've already done this research. And I know there's tons of books out there. It's only so many hours in the day for any one of us to consume it all and to report back on it. But think about it. Are we even trying? I mean, we know that there are people that are devoted to this kind of stuff, but we also know there's a lot of folks that make money off of people because they're con artists. Maybe deep down inside they believe this stuff is real, but they got to make a living, and so they do what was Michael J. Fox's character did in the movie Frighteners, which is one of Peter Jackson's first films, which is just brilliant if you haven't seen it. And what he does is he actually can see the dead, and he follows around funerals and uses agents from the other side to possess a house, and then he's the ghostbuster that comes in and cleans out the ghosts, but the ghosts are his friends, and so he's got a little scam going there. But he runs into a really bad dude who's Jake Busey playing this character. I love Jake Busey. I wrote a film for Jake. He doesn't know it, but I did. But the other exciting thing is, if you understand there's people way smarter than you, maybe they're not equal to you in every single way, but they're way smarter in the areas that you want to know information. The super exciting notion is, what if you hired them with these objectives? You had a very exhaustive interview process, of course, right? But you hire them and you give them money and you give them resources. You make them come up with a plan about how they're going to do it, what equipment they would use, what theoretical interviews they might use, psychology, physiology, science, whatever. It would be fascinating, right, to see some discoveries in these areas where society isn't ready as a whole. Because, again, they're not ready. The internals of the body, the human body, were hidden by Christianity for thousands of years. They said you can't open a human body because that's against God. Well, the Jewish culture was opening up human bodies, and the Arabs were opening up human bodies and learning how it worked and saving lives. So we were the last ones to the game, which is why when you study all of your anatomy, none of the body parts are in modern English, right? I think in man's religiously controlled paradigms, and maybe just plain old secular short-sightedness, we're doing the same thing to ourselves in a lot of cases. Not you guys. You guys are the hope of the universe, quite frankly, right? But I'm hoping, and I don't get much in the way of responses in the comment section. I do and I don't, but I mean, it's a single percentile rate of comments, and maybe you guys are doing it. But the idea is this. Are you having conversations about this kind of stuff? Are you talking to your loved ones about this kind of stuff? How are you doing with those conversations? Do you have a friend or a spouse or a child that is open to these discussions? If you're a new parent and your kids are starting to talk and they're starting to ask that question, why? Do you take the time to explain things to them? Do you say, well, sit down for a second. All right, so you're going to go to school. You're some child who's interested in science, and you're like, they want to know about the fundamentals of the universe, and you're like, okay, well, probably the most fundamental concept we should discuss is gravity, right? I know a lot of you guys don't think it exists, but I don't know how the fuck you explain how I'm held to the ground. That's what I call that stuff. But, I taught my daughter the wrong theory of gravity when she was 9 years old, thinking I was teaching her the right theory, which is mysterious force, this mysterious property where matter can pull against matter. Like there's some exchange of information and material substance between the two, which is complete bullshit. But you want to, your kid's going to go to school and learn all of these things that are claimed to be figured out, right? You go to a church and they tell you the whole fucking thing is figured out. God's figured out. The afterlife's figured out. And they got the whole rule book of what's going to send you to hell too, which is really funny, right? But today, if I had a newborn asking me the same thing, or I'm mentoring a little kid and their parents are totally cool with this sort of conversation, I'd say, well, this is what you're going to learn in school. And you're more than welcome to go down that path and try to figure out how you might prove that to be true, because it hasn't been proven. It's a phenomenon, right? Gravity's a phenomenon. But if you study ethereal models of gravity, it's all explained. It makes an equal amount of sense that this one does in terms of the factors of results. You put this amount of force in, you get this sort of thing, right? I would like to hear how you guys are dealing with this on a day-to-day basis, because I think it will be your successes and failures and my own successes and failures in communicating with other human beings that will deduce the final, I shouldn't say final, there's no final, but some of the more productive methods of having these conversations with other human beings such that we can advance the whole thing, right? The great awakening that's happening right now is, I think, more pointed at human beings understanding banking and how banking controls politics and how politics controls us. Plain and simple. Wars are a byproduct of those three factors. But the spiritual ecosystem of us, right? This idea of whether or not this is it, this is heaven, and it goes in this big circle. Again, how many wars would you fight? How many arguments would you have if you saw the full system? I mean, imagine having an argument with somebody that you love, but you're gonna shoot it out with them, and you say, "Well, in the next life, you can go screw yourself," or we're gonna see each other after this, so why are you being so mean? Maybe if you believe there's one soul, you're like, why would you do this to yourself? Why would you cheat on yourself? Why would you lie to yourself to get this little thing, this little short-term thing in this life? Well, I thought you were more into the, massaging your soul up to some super ascended level of goodness. Are you on the God mode right now where you want to just shoot everybody up because you've never done it before? Some ludicrous example of life. But imagine we started dialoguing about the daily challenges of life based on our belief system that is completely different than what we believe it is today. And hey, I might be completely full of shit on everything I've said in this episode. But you know why it's interesting? Because I haven't had anyone talk to me about this kind of stuff. It's interesting. I mean, I have just, I should say this, I am extremely privileged, beyond your input personally, to have close friends of mine that are super open-minded. But when I start talking about us potentially being a symbiotic being between a soul and a body and this ecosystem, which I've done several times in conversations, the amount of silence that occurs right after I pitch that first sort of treatment out there, it's almost unanimous. It's staggeringly deafening, the silence, because what is going on in my friends' brains, I think, is that they've never had the thought before. And so, one, I probably sound kooky to a bunch of them. It's like, oh, Jesus, where the hell are you going, man? We were just watching F1 on television and somebody died. And we had a conversation about, the families that are mourning that death or whatever. Someone might walk in the room and say they've lost someone. Right? What if you believed that we were an ecosystem? When you die as a human being, you go on to this soul-based world. And then you lose someone. But you ultimately believe in this recycling system. You've seen the proof. We have done our due diligence over the next 20 years. Right? So 2038, we're sitting pretty. We have maybe some evidence we can show people. Does that make losing a loved one any easier? Of course not. You miss what they were. And you, if you're going to continue living your life, it's going to be decades and decades and decades before you get a chance to go to the other side yourself and see them again. But that's the beauty of life, isn't it? It's the beauty of loving each other. It's the beauty of exactly what we are. And I think if we were to get to that point of realization where we believe in this system and then we lose someone, and it's natural causes too, right? Your grandparents do pass away at some point, right? Think of the level of thought and maturity you could achieve and the pioneering in your brain that can happen if instead of thinking, oh my God, did they just turn into ashes and it's over? But you say no. I believe they go on and they recycle. Well, there's a bunch of different feelings and perceptions and advancements, probably, if you're like me, in your own consciousness, if you believe that. And then maybe you find solace in that. You find a lot more peace in that. Or maybe you find a whole closet full of emotions that you've been hiding in the closet, that when you open it up, it bursts out on you and you get very emotional. And you have that Kubler-Ross thing, right? You go into like this anger, denial, like negotiation, acceptance, and eventually you're like, okay, I do believe in this afterlife thing because I've had X number of experiences, or I believe people that say they have. Okay, so I got to come to terms with this wasn't the end of that being that I love so much, right? I think you feel me. It's a long-ass episode. My hope with making episodes like this is really based on giving you personal strength and perspective based on your beliefs, not exactly mine. I'm giving you mine with as much sincerity and honesty as I can possibly muster, with as many examples as possible and coming at it from different angles, hopefully representing a bunch of you who have different angles, because I think personally, once you have an open mind, one, you'll never get butthurt again, right, if you have an open mind. But two, I don't know if you're like me, but you can get distracted with your emotions, right? It happens to everybody. You're having a great day, everything's just going great. Maybe you got a project you got to finish, or you're working on, or you're starting, and you've had a really good night's sleep, you've had a good meal, everything's great. And then a text message comes in, and it's some bad news. May not be bad news directly at you, but someone is suffering in your life, and you're like, oh my God, and now you can't think clearly. It's taking away from what you're doing. Now, this is something we sacrifice for each other, and it's an honorable thing. I'm not saying we shouldn't do that. But you'll have this thing that happens. Now, a lot of times, those little things, if you're like me, those things are happening to you by your own thoughts. You get in some form of contemplation. I think that once you can develop an acceptable, open-minded platform of thinking, right? What we have in this world is a closed-minded platform of thinking. When we are children, we are taught to accept paradigm after paradigm after paradigm in order to exist. I'm hungry. How do I get rid of this feeling in my gut? Here, have some food. Boom, 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 right? Oh, that works. Great. So I'm going to accept the fact that eating does this, and it makes me feel better, right? One of the groups of people in this world that I think benefit from having a really tough job is our law enforcement around the world. I'm obviously talking about the good guys, not the couple bad apples that make everyone look like shit. When you meet a cop that's been on the beat for 10 years plus in obviously a tougher neighborhood, but even in a nice neighborhood, there's always something going on, some domestic violence situation that's based on someone drinking too much or having financial problems or all the above. And these individuals have dealt with it. And you meet them. And then you're sitting down in some room discussing your problems or, whatever, someone's kind of problems in life. And the law enforcement person sitting there just chill as could be, cool as a cucumber. And why are they cool as a cucumber? Because they're looking at you going, I respect the fact that you have a massive emotional response to this thing that's bothering you. And, sometimes it's big enough that everybody can get shocked by it. But in a lot of cases, they just reach over and touch you. And they're like, you're alive. You woke up today. Isn't that good? Isn't that great? I buried 2 people last night. One was a car wreck. One dude just died in his living room. I had to watch people mourn of the sudden losses of individuals. Or they put people in jail because they're strung out on methamphetamine or some heroin or something. And they're watching their lives go from productive and rewarding with no limitations about what they could do with their lives. And now they're crawling into this cave where they may never escape. I lean on people like that theoretically, right? I have some friends of mine who are in law enforcement or were in law enforcement. But I lean on people like that, the wise souls from my hometown, the farmers or the just sort of the cowboys that have had tough lives, right? When you realize you bring in nothing but petty crap, and they've seen a bunch of heavy duty stuff, a soldier coming back from a war, they're an incredible example of the same thing. You can learn a lot about your priorities. When you stimulate yourself intellectually to this level of the fabric of your existence, if you care about it, right? Some people don't care and they live in bliss, and God bless them. They don't necessarily need to wake up. They'll just be the happy shoe repair guy, baker, whatever, right? But if you care, and it means you're still listening, then I think we need a methodology, right? We need something to give ourselves some empirical data as best we can possibly share it with each other, and it will give us more peace and more solace in our lives, right? I always believed in an afterlife. I don't know why. I never really felt like it was anything that Christianity had ever come up with. Even when I was a Christian, it just sort of like, well, that seems boring as hell. I'm sitting in a castle with walls and a gate, right? Build that wall. Heaven built it, okay? You have this hell and damnation, pit of fire bullshit to manipulate me while I'm on Earth, right? But I sound like a broken record. I apologize. But the second Walt walks up to me and tells me to go over there, boom, no more worries about the afterlife whatsoever, right? I mean, if anything, I'm just kind of like, well, I hope I haven't done anything wrong in this world that will make it difficult for me, but I doubt it. I'm all about saying I'm sorry if I offended someone to the point I would need to say something, right? But I no longer fear for your life either. But I know that this is a very unique experience that I think should be cherished every second you're alive, right? Again, like I've said in episodes 2 seasons ago, I don't think that those that invest in us from the other side, be it God by himself or God and the spirits that love you, your family members and all that stuff, I don't know if they care what we do with our lives, whether or not. I think they overall would want us to be happy no matter what. But I think that they do get off on us being extraordinary human beings. And that does not mean you're famous as defined by mankind. You can be an extraordinary mother and no one knows until they meet your kids. And your kids are just high quality people. Again, anyone who raises great kids is a great person. Doesn't mean if your kids go off the beaten path and embarrass you that somehow that means that you've done a bad job. Sometimes it just happens, okay? And sometimes they rebound and they come back. I want to put a little statement out there, and I hope she's watching. I can't remember the woman's name, but she gave us a comment in the YouTube channel saying that she feared that being a stay-home mom meant that she was somehow an ordinary person, maybe less than everyone else or something like that. I think that was the gist of the comment. Now, she had resolved the fact that she was special, but I want to give a huge shout out to the women that have had, well, one, the ability to stay at home and raise your kids, but also the devotion to do so. You ladies are the fabric of the universe as we know it on Earth, right? Now, for the dads, obviously, dads have the brutal the brutal world of go out and make the money no matter what. You can't stay at home usually, right? You have to be distant from your kids because you're going off and working, what have you. A lot of moms are stuck in that situation too, so it just doubles the amount of accolades I think you can give a woman who's got to do both sides of the game. Dads are often minimized in this world, but then again, that's why we have really thick skin. That's why, we are more stoic on average. And that's why we have, I think, a lot more distance to travel to be empathetic towards the universe. I hope this episode was interesting for you guys. Let's dialogue, shall we? Right? For those of you who listen to me on podcast and rarely ever come to YouTube, you don't have an account on YouTube, but you come in and you register an account simply to leave a comment. I super duper appreciate that. That means a lot to me. If you haven't been to deepthoughtsradio.com, please go. There's audio and video, so if you want to change formats, take this into your car, you're more than welcome. A lot of you have that, I think it's called a YouTube Red account, where you're able to download these into your telephone and watch them without using your digital minutes on your phone. Definitely don't cost yourself any money. The podcasts are typically, I think, about 50 to 60 meg when they're compressed. What I do, just for those of you who are interested, the show is obviously being recorded in stereo on this mic. It has left and right sensors in here. But in order to make it smaller on the podcast, I mix it in mono, which is why my voice is in the center of your car, or in the center of your head if you're wearing a headset. So I do that simply to make it a little bit smaller for you guys. There's a locked Facebook page. It is, I think, a really fun place to be. We post a lot of funny stuff on there that is based on, sort of rhetorical ignorance that we're all in when we believe something that was a little silly. But it's a good community. Everyone's really friendly with each other. So if you're on Facebook and you're sort of bored to death and you want some fun stuff in your home feed, definitely click the Facebook link on deepthoughtsradio.com and get yourself joined to the group. There's a Patreon account for those who want to donate on a monthly basis. I will say that as of 2018 fall / I guess we're in winter, I'm trying to put some more behind the scenes stuff on there. And so what I'm doing is about 80% of the episodes, I'm able to post them the second that they go into encoding on my interface. And so as soon as it comes out of encoding, the folks on Patreon can see it early, up to 3 days early before it ever gets released to the YouTube public feed. So it's actually on YouTube, but it's just unlisted. But I hope you're having a good day. Hope this was healthy. Let me know what you think. Take care of yourself and someone else, and I'll see you in the next Deep Thoughts. Over now.